Greetings, I'm James DeArruda. People call me Jim. I'm a candidate for a Master of Public Policy at UMass Dartmouth in its Department of Public Policy. This is my portfolio presentation. I've organized the portfolio with the two links so far, the home page and the courses taken. The courses taken page is organized the way Professor McGuire had suggested. Well, one link you won't find yet, but eventually will be there, is a research project that will be completed under a continuation and should be completed for the spring. Another thing you won't see on the page yet, but eventually will, is a link for an ad hoc project. This was an outgrowth of my internship at the Dighton Council on Aging, where the internship I was focused on fall prevention, fear of falling for senior citizens, but through my attendance there so frequently and many discussions with the program manager, it became clear that there was a real absenteeism problem. And so not as a student, but in my capacity as a member of the board of the Dighton Council on Aging, the program director, program manager, and I are going to collaborate to develop a policy that we'll present to the board in hopes of ameliorating some of these absenteeism problems. I look forward to making to adding that documentation as we work on it as the weeks go on. I began matriculation toward my environmental policy certificate immediately after gaining my bachelor's degree in May of 2015. And the first 2 semesters took care of the 4 requirements for that, and I earned the certificate. I was just so grateful for the introduction and for the original mind expansion that I was introduced to. Once I began matriculation toward the Master of Public Policy, my first semester, to be introduced to the salsa dancing, the social sciences, was great help. It's just a very good explanation of how there are no rules, of how everything can change regarding social science research from the beginning of an assumption to the settling on a research topic or a question or a hypothesis. And the microeconomics course I found to be fascinating, to have the opportunity to apply microeconomic concepts in policy situations. The subsequent, now with 6 classes under my belt, I felt comfortable continuing through the winter and taking that administrative law class. This was another long-term goal of mine, is to understand in depth, particularly federal administrative law. The government's fascinated me since I've been aware of it, and even before I understood that waste, fraud, and abuse were parts of government. And to look at the executive branch, particularly through the lens of administrative law, was the realization of a long-term goal. That subsequent semester introduced me to just an excellent approach to analysis of any kind of report or research or study, in looking at what topic is studied, what the data set used, and what the conclusion or contribution. It's very effective, and it was so welcomed by me following right after the administrative law class, to be able to see the history of policy and its evolution. Again, was a long-term goal. Studying statistical analysis, as challenging as it was, it also was one of the main goals that I had in following this course of study. In the summer of 2017, I took the last of the classes that are completed. And again, this was a topic of study that has been of interest to me for decades. And between the assignment of writing a book report on the long waves of economic development, and developing a legislative memo, it again was among the most satisfying classes I've ever had. And of course now I'm taking these two classes, and I've explained. I did want to also explain that the key to my learning was the reading. To study, as I mentioned before, the history, development, and especially the theory of policy. To consider these foundational, almost unitary elements at such quantum detail, to think about binary choices, to think about simple and few rules that help to determine people's choices, and that help determine the directions for policy, were just the most fascinating things to me. I also found great benefit in going back to compile all the different documents for the portfolio, and I was able to recognize how the sophistication of my analyses and the appropriate tone to the language improved over time. Um, to think that it could have improved so much in such a short time is a testament to the process, I believe. Um, I've tried to answer the question of what do I want to do with the education that I've gotten to this point, and I think it was quite natural for me to enter into the program through the environmental policy certificate. Um, but besides that, my familiarity with working with senior citizens didn't start just with my education at the through the Public Policy Center and through that coursework. All the different pieces that have been put together through this process, including the internship and the research project, they help me see clearly that any area is important. And so, based on practicality, of course, I'm interested in elder issues and public health issues, and I'm interested in environmental issues. But I think what I've come to understand, and even the kind of evolution of thought that it's been brought to where it is now because of even the classes taken this semester. My conclusion is that I want to be helpful and useful in the place where I can be useful. I think that this is, in a way, can kind of be demonstrated when I consider what happened to my employment at the time I began the process, even with the environmental policy certificate, and then following with that MPP path. What the first 4 courses did for me was, it was a very welcome thing. My ability to translate what I was learning into action happened almost immediately sometimes. In one case, just days after studying landfills in POL 562, I found myself writing about a regional public waste management issue that had become front page news. When I learned how environmental policy literacy could occasionally take my writing into the realm of risk communications, a whole new vista opened up to me. In one example, someone had made loose claims about the volatility of PCBs in a New Bedford neighborhood. It was published in the paper, and it created a perception of a hazard, an environmental hazard that was greater than the evidence could bear out. It was my job to write an editorial on that topic, and it was directly influenced by the classes that I had where we studied risk communication. I could apply that perspective to my writing, and I believe it made it more effective. In another case, by internalizing that role as a risk communicator, I was able to provide a service to the community and at the same time damage control for the newspaper that I worked for after the publication of a sensational front page headline claiming the city was the most violent in the state. I'm very grateful that I had the chance to participate in those issues and others like them, including offshore wind, health, economic development, transportation, education, whatever, crime, public health. You can see it reflected in the subjects of these classes. In fall 2015, when I began the environmental policy program, I was studying Carlos Rafael at work and ocean policy and law at UMass. I would study wind power at work and have to write about it and learn about it. And I was studying environmental policy at UMass and getting grades on it. As I say, I'm most grateful I was able to have such a satisfying meeting of my vocation and my education at that time. And of course, that dynamic continued not just during the environmental policy portion, but right up to the time that I left that job. Besides that, in a way, I was able to rediscover these topics of interest through the lens of academic rigor, and that satisfied years of curiosity, going through the repetitions of assembling a literature review and preparing data for analysis, the sort of rewiring of my brain in my approach to analysis. These were all welcome exercises and all part of the reasons I pursued this course. I simply want to conclude by thanking all the faculty who've been my instructors, been my advisors. I'm really grateful. I've already gained so much. Thank you very much.